1. There's more carbon dioxide in our atmosphere than at any time in human history. In February and March 2021, sensors at the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii, which has tracked Earth's atmospheric concentration of CO2 since the late 1950s, detected CO2 concentrations of more than 417 parts per million, ppm. Pre-industrial levels were 278 parts per million, which means that humans are halfway to doubling the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere compared to the period between 1750 and 1800. CO2 concentrations fluctuate with the seasons, with the annual CO2 concentration for 2021 predicted to be 416.3 parts per million. Even taking into account a slight fall in emissions in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The last time Earth's atmosphere contained this much CO2 was more than 3 million years ago, when sea levels were several meters higher and trees grew at the South Pole. 2. We're on the path to exceeding 1.5 C of warming. In 2015, the nations behind the Paris Agreement set an ambitious target for keeping global warming below 1.5 C. The latest IPCC report spells out just how difficult it will be for the world to stay under that limit, unless we drastically slash emissions in the very near future. The report models 5 different future emission scenarios, from very high emissions to very low emissions, and in each scenario global surfaces are expected to hit at least 1.5 C. Of the emission scenarios modeled, only the very low emission scenario estimated that the world would see less than 1.5 C of warming by the end of the 21st century. In that scenario, temperatures are likely to overshoot 1.5 C of warming between 2041 and 2060, before returning back down to 1.4 C of warming by the end of the century. This scenario would require the world to dramatically reduce its emissions with almost immediate effect. Based on current emissions, the world is likely to hit between 2.7 C and 3.1 C of warming by 2100. 3. Our remaining carbon budget is tiny. At its core, climate change is really simple to grasp. The more carbon dioxide, and other warming gases, that we put into the atmosphere, the higher global temperatures will rise. Between 1850 and 2019, humans released around 2,390 gigatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. 1 gigaton is equivalent to 1 billion metric tons, so that's a lot of carbon dioxide. So far these emissions have led to 1.07 C of warming when compared to pre-industrial levels. To have a 50-50 chance of staying under 1.5 C of warming, we can only release an extra 500 gigatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that includes emissions from the beginning of 2020. In 2019 we emitted over 36 gigatons of carbon dioxide, and as emissions are still yet to peak it looks extremely likely that the world will eventually sail past that carbon budget. The same logic applies to other temperature thresholds, too. To have a 50-50 chance of keeping temperatures below 2 degrees of warming, we must emit fewer than 1,350 gigatons of carbon dioxide. 4. Extreme heat events have become more frequent and severe. You only need to think of recent devastating wildfires in Australia, California or southern Europe to see that climate change is leading to more frequent and more severe hot weather events. The kind of extreme heat event that would have only happened on average once every 10 years between 1850 and 1900 now likely occurs 2.8 times every 10 years, and is likely to occur 4.1 times every 10 years in a world that hits 1.5 C of future warming. The same is true of once in every 50 years events. They're now more likely to occur 4.8 times in 50 years, and in a post-1.5 C world that will be 8.6 times every 50 years. Heavy rain is also more common because of climate change. The kind of heavy one-day rain that 150 years ago would have only happened once every 10 years is now happening 1.3 times every 10 years. In a world warmed by 1.5 C, that will go up to 1.5 times. And as frequency increases, so does severity. We can expect these extreme weather events to be hotter and wetter than those that went before them. 5. Humans have already caused 1.07 C of warming. The IPCC report estimates that global surface temperatures are now 1.07 C warmer than they were between 1850 to 1900. Since 1970, Global surface temperatures have risen faster than in any 50-year period over the last 2,000 years, and this has been particularly pronounced in recent years, with 2016 to 2020 being the hottest 5-year period recorded since at least 1850. And just in case there was any remaining doubt, the IPCC report makes it clear that the principal driver of these changes in temperature are down to human-released greenhouse gases. 6. Sea levels are rising faster today than ever before. Melting ice sheets and glaciers, and warming oceans lead to higher sea levels. Since 1900, sea levels have risen faster than in any preceding century in at least the last 3,000 years, and this is set to continue for a very long time. Because oceans take a long time to warm, a lot of sea level rise is already baked in. If warming is limited to 1.5 C, then over the next 2,000 years global mean sea level will rise to between 2 and 3 meters above current levels. If warming is limited to 2 C, this rises to between 2 and 6 meters above current levels. 7. Arctic sea ice is rapidly diminishing. Temperatures in the Arctic are rising faster than almost anywhere else on the planet. Between 2011 and 2020, annual Arctic sea ice reached its lowest levels since at least 1850, and late summer Arctic sea ice was smaller than at any time in at least the past 1,000 years. Under all the future emissions scenarios in the IPCC report, the sea ice minimum will fall below 1 million square kilometers at least once before 2050, making the area practically free of sea ice altogether. This level is about 15% of the average September sea ice observed between 1979 and 1988. 8. 2/3 of extreme weather events in the last 20 years were influenced by humans. The number of floods and heavy rains has quadrupled since 1980 and doubled since 2004. Extreme temperatures, droughts and wildfires have also more than doubled in the last 40 years. While no extreme weather event is never down to a single cause, climate scientists are increasingly exploring the human fingerprints on floods, heat waves, droughts and storms. Carbon Brief, a UK-based website covering climate science, gathered data from 230 studies into extreme event attribution and found that 68% of all extreme weather events studied in the last 20 years were made more likely or more severe by human-caused climate change. Heat waves account for 43% of such events, droughts make up 17%, and heavy rainfall or floods account for 16%. 9. Dengue fever could spread through much of southeastern U.S. by 2050. Dengue is the world's fastest-growing mosquito-borne virus, currently killing some 10,000 people and affecting around 100 million per year. As global temperatures are rising, Aedes aegypti mosquitoes that carry the disease could thrive in places that were previously unsuitable for them and benefit from shorter incubation periods. A recent study published in the scientific journal Nature warned that, in a warming world, dengue could spread to the U.S., higher altitudes in central Mexico, inland Australia and to large coastal cities in eastern China and Japan. 10. Average wildlife populations have dropped by 60% in just over 40 years. The average size of vertebrate, mammals, fish, birds and reptiles, populations declined by 60% between 1970 and 2014. According to the biennial Living Planet report published by the Zoological Society of London and the WWF. That doesn't mean that total animal populations have declined by 60%, however, as the report compares the relative decline of different animal populations. Imagine a population of 10 rhinos where 9 of them died, a 90% population drop. Add that to a population of 1,000 sparrows where 100 of them died, a 10% decrease. The average population decrease across these two groups would be 50%, even though the loss of individuals would be just 10.08%. Whatever way you stack the numbers, climate change is definitely a factor here. An international panel of scientists, backed by the UN, argues that climate change is playing an increasing role in driving species to extinction. It is thought to be the third biggest driver of biodiversity loss after changes in land and sea use and overexploitation of resources. Even under a 2 degrees Celsius warming scenario, 5% of animal and plant species will be at risk from extinction. Coral reefs are particularly vulnerable to extreme warming events. Their cover could be reduced to just 1% of current levels at 2 degrees Celsius of warming.